Good
evening. On behalf of the Commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the May 24th City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member of or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to put your electronic devices on silent or tickle, however you want to manage that. Lynn, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bielski?
Here.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarkey? Not here at this time. Commissioner Granger?
Here.
Commissioner Knox? I believe he's...
Okay, he is excused.
Commissioner Maish?
Here.
And Chair Webb?
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Maish, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on today's agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. Please note that agenda items 6.5 and 6.7 have been dropped from tonight's agenda and will be rescheduled to a future meeting.
Cool.
Seeing any public comments, I'd like to move to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion? Anyone who, second? Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Me? We now have approval of the minutes. Next is our requests and presentations. First up is the Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. Our Assistant Electric Utility Director, Sean Matcham, is going to be joining us for this.
Great. Good evening, Chair Webb, members of the Commission. Sean Matcham, Assistant Director with Roseville Electric Utility. I have our monthly department update for you this evening, and I just have 3 items I want to note for the Commission and for our customers, members of the public. The first item is an item I think we've briefed you on in prior Commission meetings, but since we last met in April, we have moved, Roseville Electric has moved into its new headquarter building here on 116 South Grant Street, just across the Vernon Square here from the Civic Center. This is an item that we've really been working on for the last year and a half to renovate the building, to get all the tenant improvements made, and to get our customer solutions and utility billing teams into our new headquarters here downtown. So on May 2nd, we formally opened the building for operations, and most notably for our customers and our community, our utility billing counter that was located at the Civic Center is now on the first floor of our new headquarters here downtown at what we call the Legacy Building. On May 2nd, we moved into the first 2 floors of the building, bringing our customer engagement, our customer solutions team, and our utility billing team to the new facility. So we're very excited about it. This is now, again, the new counter for paying all utilities, not only Roseville Electric's bills, but also for our environmental utilities. So that's now the new customer center for utility billing. We are still doing work in the building. We will be planning for the third and fourth floor to bring the balance of our most of our employees from the 2090 Hilltop Circle location to downtown. And we also will be putting a demonstration area in the building, utility building on the first floor to demonstrate technology, help customers with the rebates in our programs, and serve as really a forum for educating our customers about what we do on our program. So very excited to have that step behind us, and welcome the public to our new building as they engage with us on our customer-facing activities. The second item I want to mention relates to our FY23 hydroelectric rate adjustment. You may have received a GIM in your briefing packet related to this item. I did want to update the Commission and our customers on the hydroelectric rate adjustment. This, as you may recall, is an automatic rate adjustment to our electric rates that goes in effect on July 1 of every year for the balance of the fiscal year for a 12-month period. This adjustment, as a reminder, is based on hydro conditions that we see in the market, and it's an adjustment that helps us recover the additional cost to replace lost hydroelectric generation in our portfolio. The FY23 hydroelectric adjustment is an adjustment to base electric rates, and that adjustment for FY23 begin again in July 1 is 1.8%. The current rate for FY22, as we're still in FY22, was 3.6%. So this is really cutting in half the adjustment that is already in effect for FY22, and this new 1.8% will take effect in July 1 of the upcoming month here. I'm noticing the Commission here now. We do quite a bit of outreach on this with our customer base through our utility billing center, as well as key account outreach to raise the awareness to this charge on our electric rates. So you'll see more about this in our notices, our newsletters, as well as utility billing, and then we do some direct outreach with our bigger customers on what's coming down the pike on this as well. As a reminder, our portfolio on an average water year includes about 18% hydroelectric resources. And so during lower water years, drought conditions, we need to go out and replace that hydroelectric generation, and that's what this hydro surcharge does for us. The third thing I'll mention before answering any questions is an item that we do in the community with environmental utilities. I'll mention it as part of Electric's update, but Big Trucks Summer is back. And so after 2 years of virtual Big Trucks, we are ready to show off our fleet of utility vehicles again here in the community, both at the Utility Exploration Center in Mahaney Park, as well as the MIDU Center, also here in Roseville. The Big Trucks Week or Big Trucks Summer is really every Thursday in June from 9 to 11, and we'll have, along with our equipment, EU will have their equipment out, and very cool event for us to put on for the community, for families and kids to get out and see what our equipment looks like and what we do in the community. So excited to get back in person with this. Here at Electric, I'll mention, we've got big competition with EU when they go out with their equipment as well. They have dump trucks, they have garbage trucks, and those things are stiff competition. But we'll be bringing all the electric toys out, the line trucks and everything, to do the best we can. So anyway, very excited about that. You can find information about this event again on roseville.ca.us/big trucks. And so draw your attention to that and look forward to seeing folks out in the community on that item. Those are the 3 items I wanted to mention as part of our department update. We have a couple presentations on the agenda here to discuss our legislative and regulatory activities as well as our upcoming budget. But I'll stop there and I can entertain any questions, general questions about that update and the utility.
Yes. You
So,
had a question.
I was actually surprised that the aid station index is only 16% below average.
Yeah, we were surprised that it was that the hydro. I'm sorry. Ask your question. Your question again.
Well, I guess I was just asking you to respond to it. We hear that the conditions are so dry,
Yeah.
but 16% below normal doesn't seem to me to be that dry. And I was wondering if part of it is how's the Calaveras project doing? Because I know the Middle Sierras here have actually done pretty well this year. So anyway, if you have any additional information, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't have any additional information on the specific reservoirs at this point. We were surprised to see that the hydro adjustment was as low as it is personally for adjusting for rates, because we've been hearing that the drought conditions are much more severe than what we're seeing in some of the calculations. But it's something we've been looking at closely. But unfortunately, I don't have any specific responses to the reservoir, the Calaveras project exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions over here? No? Over here? Okay. I want to ask, is there anyone from the public who'd like to come in forward and address the commission on this item? Not hearing any questions from the public. I want to say thank you so much, Sean.
Yep. Thank you.
And next up is our item 6.2, Roseville Electric Legislative and Regulatory Update. And this is being presented by Chris Romero. He's the Roseville Electric Government Relations Analyst. Thank you for your coming to join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. I am filling in tonight for my boss, Miss Amber Blixt, who had a healthy baby boy last month, and she's currently on maternity leave. So congratulations to her. Tonight, I'll be briefing you on some of the key legislative and regulatory events that have transpired the past several months. First, we'll talk about our legislative and regulatory advocacy efforts. Then we'll summarize some key legislation, and after that, we'll transition to a couple of key energy issues, both at the state and federal level. One of the department's key priorities, it's not only a priority for the department, but the city and our city council, is our legislative and regulatory advocacy efforts. Monitoring legislation makes up a big portion of these advocacy efforts. This year, staff has tracked over 140 state and federal energy-related bills. In tracking these bills, staff follows a legislative platform. This platform is approved by council each year, and it guides our advocacy. We also have dedicated resources that work with staff to ensure our business interests are covered at both the state and federal level. In addition to our lobbyists, we also work closely with our trade associations to monitor and help influence legislation and regulatory issues that can impact our utility. These trade associations include the California Municipal Utilities Association, also known as CMUA, the Northern California Power Agency, NCPA, and the American Public Power Association, APPA, which monitors activities at the federal level. Now I'd like to transition into some of our key state legislation we've been monitoring. Just to note that due to time limitations, we can only share a handful of these bills tonight. Our first bill, Senate Bill 1393, focuses on fuel switching of retrofit buildings. This bill requires the California Energy Commission, the CEC, to develop and publish on its website guidance and best practices to help building owners and local governments overcome barriers to electrification of buildings and installation of EV charging equipment. This bill would require a city, when it adopts an ordinance that would require replacement of a natural gas appliance with an electric appliance, to consider these guidelines. The bill would require the local government, within 60 days of adopting the ordinance, that they would submit to the CEC a copy of their local ordinance, and would require the CEC to determine whether the city considered these guidance and best practices in the adoption of that ordinance. If the CEC determines the city did not consider the guidance, they would need to make modifications and resubmit back to the CEC within 180 days. Roseville currently does not have an ordinance that forces this type of fuel switching for alterations or retrofit of buildings, and the bill would not apply to Roseville. However, we do provide voluntary programs with incentives to encourage this type of fuel switching. We will continue to monitor this bill for any impacts to our customer programs. Our next bill is AB 2793. This bill focuses on evaluating the cap-and-trade program. The California Air Resources Board has a cap-and-trade program that provides annual allowances to utilities to help in meeting costs of the state's emission reduction goals. This bill requires CARB on a triennial basis in consultation with the Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee, the IEMAC, to conduct an evaluation of the cap-and-trade program to determine its effectiveness in meeting clean energy goals. It also requires CARB in consultation with the IEMAC to adopt public banking metrics that track the number of unused compliance instruments in public and private accounts on an annual basis. It authorizes CARB to revise cap-and-trade regulations so that the program can better meet updated state emission goals. And as we have seen in recent years, the state legislature and regulatory agencies continue to make changes to their goals that put increased pressure on utility costs in providing reliable electricity. As our department transitions into a cleaner energy portfolio to meet these mandates, these allowances are an important step to help manage some of our costs. Any reduction in these allowances could put increased pressure on costs, which could impact electric rates. Staff will continue to monitor this bill to see what direction CARB may take with the cap-and-trade program. Our next two bills are going to focus on electric vehicle charging stations. With Assembly Bill 2703, in this bill, the CEC is to develop a new program to provide financial assistance to low-income customers to use EV charging stations. As a condition of receiving state funding or incentives, the recipient of the charging station must agree to operate the charging station in compliance with CEC reliability standards that will be developed. These requirements shall apply to any publicly available EV charging station that receives state funding or incentives. It will apply to any charging station installed on or after July 1st, 2023. The intent of this legislation is to help support meeting the state's goals of having 5 million zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2030. Our department is watching to see the applicability of any of these new reliability standards. AB 2061, this is another bill that impacts publicly funded charging stations that receive state incentives. This bill states that beginning July 1st of 2023, anyone receiving incentive funding from a state agency to own or operate a charging station would be required to report charging station uptime to the CEC. Uptime is the charging station being online and available or in use. Beginning in 2025, the CEC will review the uptime of these charging stations to identify if there are any differences in uptime based on population density, geographical area, or population income level. If there's any issue with any of these factors, the CEC may consider adopting requirements or providing incentives to increase the charging station uptime. The bill does not apply to charging stations installed at residential properties with 4 units or fewer. Currently, this bill does not impact Roseville electric-owned EV chargers because we have not received state funding for any of our EV chargers in the city. We're watching this bill to better understand the Energy Commission requirements and any incentives they may offer, which could provide an opportunity to expand our EV infrastructure in the future. Senate Bill 1020, the Clean Energy Jobs and Affordability Act of 2022. This bill is jointly authored by the Senate Pro Tem Atkins and the leader of the Senate Climate Working Group, Senator Laird. California currently has a clean energy goal of supplying 100% renewable and zero-carbon resources by the year 2045. This bill would establish interim targets to reach clean energy goals, 90% renewable zero-carbon resources by 2035 and 95% renewable zero-carbon resources by 2040. This bill would also require all state agencies to purchase 100% of their zero-carbon resources by the year 2030. And this bill would also establish a climate and equity trust fund to help electric customers with affordability if electric rates increase due to this legislation. Staff is working closely with our trade associations, the CMUA and the NCPA, which is in the process of preparing a document with joint public power comments and suggestions for the author's consideration. Once the document is finalized, our trade associations will meet with Senator Pro Tem and Senator Laird's staff to walk them through our issues and to address any concerns we may have. One primary concern at this time that's generated a lot of concern is that we would like to make sure the interim goals in this bill are just policy goals and not compliance targets. Prescriptive mandates could be problematic for our utility. We're in the beginning stages of dialogue with this bill, and there will be more to come when we provide our legislative summary to you later this year. AB 2696. This bill is a transmission planning bill. It would require the CEC to conduct a study to review various low-cost alternative financing mechanisms for new transmission facilities needed to meet the state's clean energy goals. Some of the potential alternatives may include public ownership, public financing, and also partnering with federal agencies. We have this bill on our radar because new transmission planning is very high as a priority for the legislature this year. The California Independent System Operator estimates it could take approximately $30 billion in transmission assets investments over the next 20 years to meet clean energy goals. It is expected that this bill would make it easier for the Public Utilities Commission to approve transmission projects, and that could entail cost concerns for other electric utilities. Fortunately, Roseville is largely insulated from these transmission cost increases. We do, however, continue to support transmission infrastructure improvements, but with the caveat that the costs are allocated to those that will directly benefit from those transmission improvements. We will continue to watch this bill and ensure that it does not grow into something that could have adverse cost implications for the city. And our last bill is SB 1075. Talks about green hydrogen and its potential impacts on the state's decarbonization and greenhouse gas reduction strategies. Hydrogen has been recently gaining more support at both the federal and state level as a decarbonization solution. This bill would create a state clean hydrogen hub fund to support a federal hydrogen hub grant. With the help of this bill, California is seeking to develop a leading green hydrogen industry in our state. The governor would appoint a clean hydrogen hub director who will work closely with the state's iBank and other agencies to administer the fund to provide grants for clean hydrogen projects developed in California. As hydrogen and other new technologies emerge, we're watching this bill to understand how this resource may or may not work for our department. One state issue we've been following closely is the State Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. Last month, the CEC hosted a workshop to get stakeholder feedback on the draft Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. The plan outlines the state's pathway to deploying the ZEV infrastructure needed, which is crucial to support the state's ZEV adopted goals. This plan will collaborate with state agencies to provide feedback. These agencies include Caltrans, CARB, the Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the Governor's Office and Economic Development. The plan focused on assessing the infrastructure needs and challenges. These include improving building codes, streamlined permitting, supporting hydrogen vehicles, and standardization of charging and fueling infrastructure. It also focused on infrastructure funding efforts and an infrastructure deployment plan. There are additional workshops scheduled over the next several months. The final plan is expected to be published this summer. ZEVs are a key part of our utilities service offerings going forward, and making sure we are prepared and understanding of this state plan is very important, as it will further impact our future decision-making. Roseville Electric is currently going through its own EV plan and projection study. Roseville Electric sees investments in zero-emission vehicles and related infrastructure as an important part of how we serve our community, how we strengthen our revenue base, and how it guides how we make future investments in Roseville. And last, on the federal side, I'd like to talk about a key power resource that Sean alluded to earlier, hydropower. Last month, the Supreme Court reinstated the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's EPA Clean Water Act, Section 401 rule. This rule limits the state's authority to certify energy projects, including hydropower relicensing applications, reducing it down to 1 year. This reinstatement triggered prompt state action pending an appeal. For now, at least, the Supreme Court action is an important step in the right direction, as the 401 process is mutually viewed as highly unpredictable and a key contributor to the overall extended length of the hydropower licensing process. Hydropower remains an excellent zero-carbon resource for utilities. Hydropower will be a key resource to support meeting the state's 100% zero-carbon energy goal by 2045. And although there is a small risk with short-term variability due to drought conditions, hydropower remains a viable long-term asset for meeting our long-term goals. And this concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Chris?
I was just curious, are there any bills out there that we've taken a support or support if amended or an opposed position on?
Well, currently this year, we don't have any, up to this point, formal support or oppose. Typically, every year, we will get big bills and have that. Right now, we're in a stage in the legislative process, midway, where we have time to work with the author. If we have an oppose at this time, we don't want to take an oppose publicly, so we will work with our lobbyists, we'll work with our trade associations, and have them take the lead to make that oppose position to kind of keep us in a positive light. Oh, yeah. So that's where we're at now. We've got a couple more months. We're working with our trade associations and lobbyists on several bills to try to shape some of these, the language in these bills that will favor our utility and our customers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed on SB 1393, of course, there's going to be encouragement to replace gas appliances with electric.
Yeah.
Now, is that will that force end users to replace, or will they be grandfathering of some residential?
Well, at this time, the utilities and our trade associations are, we've been advocating to be grandfathered in because retrofitting all that would cost a fortune.
It would.
So at this time, so far, they've heard our concerns, and right now, nothing's been forced at this time. So, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Are they considering requiring the upgrades at point of sale?
As far as the natural gas to electric? Yeah, I believe, Sean, is that right, with our new development, our all-electric plans for some communities? I believe that might be the case.
Yeah, I think maybe when we look at end-use appliances, certainly for the building code requirements, we're seeing building codes change to encourage or mandate all electric appliances. It's not building code yet, but we see a trend of it moving in that direction. So as we sit here now, there's no mandate for that to happen, whether it's on a commercial building or residential construction. But what we're hearing is certainly on the commercial side, a trend to institute all-electric appliances in commercial buildings. We do have some all-electric homes being built here in Roseville. There's been some around for several decades, and we're seeing new development being interested in advancing all-electric homes. That's just builders and developers moving to that direction on their own at this point, at that level for residential new construction. And so nothing mandated at this point, but certainly we see the regulations trending towards that. We do have a number of electrification programs that we offer as a utility, both for electric vehicles, but even for end-use appliances. Those programs, as Chris mentioned, are really voluntary for our customer base. As you may know, we have funding as an electric utility to dedicate towards these sort of resources. So we use that funding to really understand customer adoption of end-use appliances, what it does to load patterns, and what we can expect to invest in our infrastructure to make sure we continue to serve those type of customers reliably. But nothing mandated at this point, but I think we see that coming down the pike, certainly sooner with commercial, later with residential.
It's been my observation that it's popular for the state to say, oh, well, we're required at point of sale. But what it does is it makes everybody who's a homeowner have to go through all the costs. I mean, changing out your stove, your heat and air conditioning system, your hot water heater, you're talking multiple tens of thousands of dollars worth of costs before you can sell your house. It would be, in my view, bad.
We certainly understand that perspective. Many years ago, when legislation was introduced to double the energy efficiency of end-use appliances, SB 350 many years ago, raising the energy efficiency targets, many of the same questions were asked about what that means for the end-use customer. And so no mandates yet, really just targets, but something we'll keep a close eye on, and we'll report back as things change.
So can I?
Go ahead.
Multifamily units, is there an inherent problem, or do we have a solution for people who have zero or electric vehicles that live in multifamily units? I was talking to somebody who said most of them are not set up to install the charging facilities that they need for electric vehicles.
Yeah, I'm not, it's not apparent to me that we have a problem. We've been doing a lot in our community to advance EV charging infrastructure. We've focused on residential, making sure residences, single-family residences are equipped, as well as workplace charging. But I know that we're looking into what we can do on multifamily. There's not something that I see as an impediment, other than making sure that there's a customer base for it. If we're investing infrastructure in charging stations and upgrading the system to support charging in a multifamily home, that need is there, and that use is there. So I don't see necessarily we have a problem. We're moving through the community and understanding where that need is. So I'll say we don't have a problem, but certainly where we're placing stations and where we're putting infrastructure is really just kind of evolving as we see the growth of electric vehicles. Chris mentioned earlier in his presentation, we brought on a consultant to help us look at projections for EV adoption in the community. And that's really geared to informing us on where investment decisions are being made. And I think the multifamily question and the demand there that may be there for electric vehicles is something that we'll learn from our studies and inform our decisions here locally. But to be responsive to your question, I'm not aware of an issue we're having. It's just, when do we roll that technology out to that part of the community?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Does anyone in the public like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not hearing any public comment. I want to say thank you, Chris and Sean. It's a moving target, yes. Next item on our agenda is the Roseville Electric budget overview. This report is being presented by our Electric Utility Finance Administrator, Eric Campbell, and Senior Electric Business Analyst, Joanna Cucci. Did I get it right? Yeah, good. And so if you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. I'm Eric Campbell for the record, and I'm joined by Joanna Cucci. We're going to give you an update on the proposed FY23 budget for Roseville Electric. Jumping to the budget overview on the first page there. As with any initiative we do within the electric department, we always make sure we're in alignment with the City Council strategic plan. In particular, we've aligned ourselves with the goal of remain fiscally responsible in a changing world. This proposed budget also positions the electric department to deliver on our mission, and that's to deliver safe, reliable electricity at competitive rates with exceptional service. It also keeps us in compliance with our financial policies and metrics, in particular our debt service coverage ratio and days cash on hand. And then lastly, this is a bit of a new item that we haven't seen in quite a while, is we're also proposing a transfer from our rate stabilization fund of $4 million this year to balance our budget. And you may ask why are we doing that? And it's really power supply cost. Going back to last year, when we put the power supply forecast together in preparation for the rate case, when you compare those numbers to what the power supply market looks like today, costs are up 26%. So they've increased dramatically over the past 12 to 13 months. A couple of the reasons why are natural gas prices. They're up to $8, $9. And then hydro. There was some discussion earlier around hydro. Hydro is a big exposure for us. That's also hurting us as well. So again, 26% costs are up year over year, and we're only proposing a $4 million transfer from the RSF fund. And keep in mind, the RSF fund was set up for these types of situations, when they do come up, to make sure we're not impacting our ratepayers, too dramatically in the short term. Next, I'm going to jump to what's in the budget. It's been quite a while since we talked about this. The first big item is our operating budget. It's about $148 million. Of that $148 million, 65% is power supply cost. So it's a pretty significant line item for our budget. Next is capital. We have $22 million budgeted for capital in FY23. $14 million of that is actually paid for by customers, and the remainder is paid for by developers. Next is the franchise fee. We pay a 4% franchise fee per the city charter. That's about $7.5 million that we pay to the city. That goes to fund fire, police, parks, and rec. City streetlights, we set aside $1.4 million for city streetlights. Traffic signals, $2.5 million. We fund that operation as well. Utility billing, we share costs with that department with EU. Our share of that's about $4 million. UEC, the Exploration Center, it's another 50-50 endeavor with EU. Our portion of that's about $700K. And then finally, all the support services from the city, IT services, financial services, legal services, et cetera. We pay back to the city about $5.7 million for those services, so it's a pretty significant chunk of our budget. Now, moving on to some numbers, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna to walk you through those.
Hi. The slide you're looking at now shows the FY22 budget and then also the FY23 proposed budget. Starting up at the top with energy sales, we have an increase in revenue from energy sales of $15 million. $6 million of that is the adopted rate case increase, $5 million is growth, and $3 million is the hydroelectric surcharge. You also see an increase in the operating expenses of about $20 million. $14 million of that is the power supply expense that Eric talked about. $3 million is in labor, and $1 million is in pension expense. In the non-operating revenue, there's an increase of $5 million, and this is due to the California Department of Water and Power peaking units out at the REP. And then at the bottom, at the RSF transfer, you can see the $4 million that we're transferring from the Rate Stabilization Fund. The $4 million is about 6% of the current balance of the Rate Stabilization Fund. And with that transfer, we are proposing a balanced budget. Walking through our three key financial policies, our policy for days cash on hand is to maintain greater than 250 days. The current budget proposal has the utility maintaining 416 days cash on hand through FY23. The debt service coverage ratio requires that the net operating revenue, or revenue minus expenses, covers the debt service on our bonds 2 times. The FY23 budget has a debt service coverage ratio of 2.17, exceeding our policy goal. And finally, the Rate Stabilization Fund is used to provide resources to cover large contingencies, such as unexpected expenses, while leveling out the impact to our customers, as Eric mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. The policy range for the balance in the Rate Stabilization Fund is 40% to 90% of operating expenses. Per the FY23 proposed budget, the utility will have 42% of operating expenses in the Rate Stabilization Fund. And as we just mentioned, $4 million are being transferred from the Rate Stabilization Fund to cover expenses in FY23, and the 42% here accounts for that transfer.
Thanks, Joanna. Moving on, strong financial foundation. just a couple of points we want to hit on here. Financially center cost-based and competitive rates. Cost-based, we talked about that during the rate case process last year. We try to set rates that don't over-collect, but don't also under-collect as well. And then competitive rates, we're among the lowest in the state. I think we're third lowest based on our most recent research. I think the two lowest are irrigation districts. Next, we may need some additional revenue to address this power supply issue in the coming years, actually coming months, I should say. So we're looking at what that means to us in terms of rates, what we could propose. This 26% increase that I mentioned earlier, looking at FY23, we see that continuing on into 24 and beyond, and upwards of 30% in those out years. So we're really kind of in a bit of a holding pattern, trying to figure out what the markets are going to do looking forward from a cost perspective. Next, we're continuing our emphasis on liquidity, our cash balances, cost discipline. These are things we were doing way before this energy market issue that we're dealing with right now. We look at our capital projects. We're continually moving those around, the cash flows, evaluating what we can push out, what we can advance, et cetera. And then finally, our debt ratings with S&P and Fitch are at AA. That's squarely in the middle of the top tier. And we don't see anything that's going to negatively impact those in the near term, other than potentially this energy supply issue. And then moving on to our key trends and issues or risk. Obviously, economic uncertainty and the power supply costs, inflation. You probably have all seen the 8% CPI number that's been advertised in the past week or so. We're seeing, increased cost on materials. Some suppliers are adding surcharges up to 10%. So we're beginning to see those types of costs seep into our cost structure. Recruitment and retention. This is a persistent issue for the utility, trying to find, qualified staff, folks with utility experience. LEDS reg, Chris talked about this earlier. I think they're tracking over 140 bills in 2022. Extreme weather events, why that's on the list here is more from a transmission perspective. Our Roseville service territory is not in a high fire risk area, but some of the transmission lines that serve our service territory are. So that presents a risk to us. PERS and OPEB liability, Joanna mentioned the $1 million pension impact earlier. There's about a $1.1 million impact that was not planned for in this budget. And we're a little bit concerned that may continue in the out years as well. Next is the California Department of Water Resource peaking units. We have the option to buy those units in December of 23, so we'll most likely be taking a look at that in the next couple months. And then lastly, we have some debt that's going to be maturing in May of 23. It's about $54 million, so we're going to have to be in the market to either refund that or defease it. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Questions here?
Wow. Wow.
So,
Comments, perhaps?
yeah.
So I love your list of key trends, and I, the only one you didn't mention was the potential for recession. On top of it,
Yeah.
losing revenue, and I, from what I know about it, prices are increasing. The price of energy is increasing faster than prices because of a number of factors. I'm a little concerned that we're headed in a direction where taking $4 million out of the rate stabilization fund is just going to make the impact on customer rate increases larger when we get around to solving the problem. But I think I know that where we're at in our cycle of rate increases, it's not one of our choices to raise rates.
We share your concern, and the $4 million is really to give us some time to understand the market, the energy market, and what's happening, and what really makes sense going forward in terms of a rate, in terms of a proposed rate increase, I should say. We could be back in the next 6 months with a proposal to increase rates. We just don't know what that number looks like right now.
Right.
But we share that same concern.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate that we've got really good rates in Roseville, but underfunding the cost of operation is just not good policy.
Yeah, just to add a little to that, we gave a similar presentation to the council last month, and this very discussion was on our minds about looking at how things, the future looks so much different than it did just last fall when we came to this commission and our council with our rate adjustments. And so, the discussion internally for us is really, as we look at the power supply costs over the next several years, how do we respond to that? Is it to move sooner on a rate adjustment than we planned? Do we lean on reserves and wait a little longer? I can tell you that that's an active discussion that we're having internally within the organization and with the city for exactly the reason you'd mentioned. And I'll add that we've spent the last 10 years putting the electric utility in such a great position of financial strength, where our rate structure is, where our reserves are, where our financial metrics are. To lean on our reserves and burn through them, let's say, in a couple years, would perhaps do a disservice to the organization and the service that we provide to the community. So for us, it's really looking at timing and magnitude of a rate adjustment in light of what we're seeing on the power supply side. We certainly would not have forecasted in the fall what we're in now, the market we're in. And so we're able to absorb this in the short term, but the question for us as an organization is how does that look? What dials do we want to turn to manage costs, and what adjustments are we comfortable advancing with our customer base and community for rate adjustments going forward? When we did our rate case in the fall, there was a scenario there that we thought we could be good for FY25, FY26. What we're seeing now is we would need a rate adjustment sooner than that. And so we're really, it's a focused discussion internally at the organization, and something we take very seriously about how we go back out to the community and ask for money.
Well, I think, when the governor comes out and says we ought to keep Diablo Canyon running a few more years, as if that was easy to get through FERC, and their relicensing, snap your fingers or something. It's, to me, a signal of there beginning to be a recognition that the costs of maintaining reliable energy supplies in California are going to get dramatically more expensive as we continue to pursue the greenhouse gas reduction goals, and it's going to hurt everybody. But I think maintaining reliability is the thing that you have to do, and you got to have the money to do it. I mean, the cost of energy in the afternoons is just going to skyrocket, and there's people that are going to go bankrupt that aren't prepared for this. And so I support not taking any more money out of rate stabilization fund, especially when we're supposed 40 is the minimum and we're at 42%.
Right.
It doesn't seem like we've got a whole lot of extra there.
Right.
To me.
Thank you.
So I had a question. We're talking about power supply costs as a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Is it probably number one? And if it's not number one, what are 1, 2, and 3?
It's definitely number one.
Okay.
Secondly is inflation, potential recession, those types of things. That's where the big dollar impact could hurt us.
Okay.
And then digging a little bit deeper, it's on the materials, more so than labor, in terms of those types of inflationary impacts.
Yeah. So while qualified, getting qualified staff is a concern and an issue, it's not necessarily in the top 3 problem, or maybe it is.
I would say the cost possibly aspect of retaining staff.
Mm-hmm.
But like right now, it really the power supply market and then the inflation within materials market, that's really more the focus right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, recruitment and retention is always something that we try to keep our thumb on the pulse of. And then depending on certain positions, depending what we're recruiting for and the timing, the market there's an ebb and flow, and we have success recruiting, and then sometimes there's challenging to recruit. But going back to the power supply cost, and Eric and Joanna can correct me, why this is so important to us and the size of the organization we're in, power supply cost represents 2/3 of our operating budget. So we have a $175 million operating budget. All in, what we're seeing now is $100 million of that is for power supply. So when the power supply markets move on us considerably, like what we've seen over the last few months, our ability to absorb a 30% change, almost a $20+ million change in that budget, there's limited room to absorb the balance of that increase. And so we have reserves to help protect customers from rate shock. But, I think going to the comments that have been made here, we call it, and I call it, we call it getting healthy quickly, meaning making sure we can recover our costs through our rates. If there's something that we need to lean on rate stabilization or other reserves, we'd like to make that a short-term arrangement. So going back to the order and magnitude, just because of the sheer magnitude of the cost on our budget and operations, when power supply costs take off, we need to be in a position to respond because they're such a big, significant part of our budget. Labor, it's more of retaining talent, attracting talent, and that's an ongoing item. But what we've seen here in the last few months on power supply costs is not like we've seen in probably 15, 18 years.
And I would add that the labor bucket is the second biggest bucket after power supply.
Okay.
What's our target for, it says revenues are an issue. Is there thoughts as to what the utility might go after? Are we?
It goes back to that whole rate discussion on whether or not, will we, dip into the reserve fund more or propose a rate increase, possibly a surcharge, something temporary. We're looking at all sorts of different options.
Any potential commercial or industrial users that could come to town that could help out? Or what about Ford F-150s in every neighborhood charging up? Is that seen as?
Longer term, that's an opportunity, definitely.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Maish started talking a little bit about the cost of power in the middle of the afternoon. And you've told us in the past that there is a plan to start having time of day metering. How does that, is that something that we can push forward, bring in faster, and is that even going to help?
Yeah, good question. It's the time of use rates are tied to the implementation of the advanced metering infrastructure, and right now it's targeted to finish full deployment in 24. So we're probably looking at time of use rate sometime later in 25 at the earliest.
Yeah.
It's still on the roadmap.
Is that something that happens first for commercial users or not really?
There's a variety of approaches you can take. We haven't really got into that yet in terms of how we want to roll it out, but that's definitely something we could look at first, look at commercial versus residential.
Yeah.
But the technology will be there to support both.
Yeah.
One more question. I know it's probably a big question, though. So it sounds like the commodity markets, so natural gas, are we at a point where it's costing more to operate our thermal plant than maybe to buy other resources in the marketplace?
We use REP more as a hedge to the market, and so it's more of a financial analysis where we look at where it's cheaper to buy, whether it's rather cheaper to buy or to make. It's not at the point now where it's out of the money, I would say, the REP plant.
Gotcha.
The biggest risk for REP is that the transportation cost of gas. Those costs have increased dramatically in the past year. I think maybe 400%. It's an incredible increase.
For the pipeline costs?
On the pipeline cost.
Is it feasible, you see a lot of the legislation for hydrogen to fuel, could it be retooled to be fueled by hydrogen at some point?
I'm not really positioned to answer that.
Yeah.
That's a big transition.
Yeah,
huge.
that's a big transition for Roseville Energy Park here in Roseville. We've got some other Northern California Power Agency is exploring options for hydrogen. We're sitting back and watching to see how this evolves with the industry. Not ready to say that's certainly not ready to say that's a path forward for us here in the community. But it is emerging, as you saw from the legislative and regulatory update. There is focus on it, and it may be a tool in the toolbox, but it's not in front of us right now.
Yeah.
One more. On the hydrogen, hydrogen that isn't created by stripping it from natural gas, which would kind of be defeating of the purpose of green hydrogen. In other words, created by excess electricity. Isn't that like almost a factor of 10 more expensive than natural gas? I mean, I thought that it was a big differential.
Yeah, I don't have a reference to. You may very well be right. I don't have a good reference for it. I know what I've been told on it is, retrofitting your facility can be costly because of the pressure and the operation and that it has to change in the operations of the system. But in terms of the cost differential, I don't have a good reference for it at this point.
The equipment costs will be huge.
Yeah.
When you convert to hydrogen.
Yeah, I've heard the equipment costs are significant to retrofit, but in terms of the extraction of the commodity, if you will, I don't have a good reference on that.
Okay, one more.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You touched on the metering. I assume our new meters are paid for in a prior budget year, or are we paying those ongoing?
We haven't paid for them yet, but the
Okay.
money's been reserved.
Okay. And then is it possible, my house is 21 years old, so is it possible that new meters might be more efficient and might possibly
definitely.
generate revenue in the fact that they'd be recording usage
Definitely.
better?
Yeah, meters slow down over time, so
Yeah.
some of the older meters may not be picking up all the usage. That's not going to be a significant number overall,
Okay.
most likely, but there's going to be a little bit of an uptick, definitely.
And then in the labor bucket, not to project, but what's our PERS formula? Is it,
I think there's 3 different PERS
Okay.
formulas, depending on when your start date was.
okay, and then is it impacting us? And somebody said, I'll go to Rockland and get 3% at 50 or something like that, or I'll go
I
work
think
for
that has
SMUD?
come up yet.
Okay.
I know the folks that are in the PEPRA, they're a little more likely to move around
Right.
than some folks on the traditional plan.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Do we have any questions from the public? Not seeing any questions. I want to thank both of you all 3 of you, for a lively discussion about
Thank you. Thanks
predicting
for
the
the
future. And how to have great electric utility for us here in Roseville.
Great, thank you.
All right, so next up, we have the Environmental Utilities Monthly Update. Today's presentation is being given to us by Environmental Utilities Business Services Administrator Janet Vargas, on behalf of our Environmental Utilities Assistant Director Devin Whittington. And Janet, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. I'll just give you a brief update from EU, just a few things. The first one is that we did our CCI calculations for increases to our capacity fees and development-related fees. Effective July 1st, those will go up by 11.47%, so quite a large increase. We're hoping that it somewhat stabilizes. They're anticipating that the next round, which will be a year from now, but those are expected hopefully to be a little bit lower. The second item I wanted to bring to your attention is that EU has kicked off an internal control study. So we have worked with Moss Adams to do an agreed-upon procedures report for I'll just call it the EU financial mischief that occurred in our department in this last year. So we're anticipating that they're going to be evaluating and testing some of the processes and controls within the city. So hopefully we'll come out with some good opportunities to keep a closer watch on things. As I'll let you know earlier or later, you can never make fraud go away. People just get smarter and trickier. It's just our job to kind of stay one step ahead of them. And then the last one, again, big trucks coming up. If you have a chance to get out there, please do. It's amazing. These children are fantastic. But make sure you come out early because it does fill up very, very quickly. The first two will be at Mahaney, and the second two will be at Maidu. So we will finish off the big truck season, if you will, with waste services. And that one is huge, just huge. It's amazing how excited these children get when they see the big machine come back and eat a couch. It's little things in life, right? So get out there early because there is quite a crowd. But if you get a chance, please come out. So that's what I wanted to mention in my update. If you have any questions.
Questions here? Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not seeing any public comment. I want to say thank you so much, Janet.
Thank you.
Our next item is been pushed out for another date. This would be the legislative and regulatory update from environmental utilities. So I will go ahead and move to the environmental utilities budget overview, also by Janet. Thank you.
Thank you again. My presentation is a little different from Roseville Electric's, but hopefully you'll find it just as enjoyable, and we can have a lively discussion about it. So the first thing we start with is, being fiscally responsible is very, very important to EU. We are growing a progressive and customer-faced utility, and we pride ourselves on providing very high levels of service. So in conjunction with our rate modeling, we perform a 10-year lookout where we forecast and look for indicators that might impact our rates down the road, and we want to get started planning for those in the early years. We also strive for highest value in our services, not necessarily the lowest cost or the lowest rates. So while we do enjoy the fact that we have some of the lower rates amongst the region, compared to other jurisdictions, our goal really is to maximize and pack in as much value as we can for each rate dollar that we charge our customers. In non-rate setting years, we perform a customer satisfaction survey, so that'll be coming up shortly. So as you can see here, the level is currently at 98%. There's good and bad with that always because there's only one way to go but down. So we work extremely hard to keep those levels high. Our next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back, please. Next section, funded by user fees. So this is a big thing. EU is funded by ratepayers. We don't get any money from sales tax or from our property taxes. Everything comes from our ratepayers. And this is often somewhat confused in the public, but as you know, we strive to meet our financial goals, and we're an enterprise fund, and we operate like a business. So, and then as far as our rates go, in accordance with council's wishes, we review our rates every 2 years, and we propose smaller, more frequent rate adjustments. We had a period of time where we didn't have any rate adjustments in one of our utilities, and then we had to come in at one point and have a bigger one. So they didn't like that, and we appreciate that. So it was kind of mandated to us that we come in with lower ones, more frequent. That's why we do our rates every 2 years. And then, like electric that we heard on their presentation, EU is also a big contributor to the general fund. So similar to electric, we pay for our share of general fund services like HR, attorney's office, finance. And then we also pay for the internal service funds, which is IT, fleet, and facilities. And then our last item here, we remain focused on continued service, reliability, and rehabilitation, with reliability probably being one of our bigger aspects that really drives us the hardest. All right. So this slide shows our modeled revenues on rate settings and forecasted increases. You can see for the first time that waste services has increased revenues or operational expenses greater than water. Primarily, this is due to the mandates that you have seen that's come before us. And then water increases really reflect our stable, robust investment in our reliability. And then wastewater, there's a couple of things to point out right here. So wastewater, we have 2 regional plants, Dry Creek and Pleasant Grove. So they're expensive to maintain with intensive labor costs, wells, and as well as energy and chemicals. Sorry. So for fiscal year 23, you can see that the wastewater number is just slightly than 22. What happened there is we moved some money in fiscal year 22 from our operations to our rehabilitation funds. We set up a new fund called Regional Rehabilitation. So we have our local rehab, and then we have our regional rehab. And regional is the projects that we share with our partners. So we moved some money over there to get that started so that our portion is funded. We pay for all the projects, and then the partners pay us back. Our next slide, this is our obligatory pie chart. This is Dennis Kaufman's favorite slide. So this is just a visual of what we just spoke of before. But, as we noted on the previous slide, that, it takes a lot of labor, chemicals, energy costs to maintain. We have over 600 miles of pipe and over $2 billion in assets. So this is our EU focus areas as we move into fiscal 23. So our core functions really are a 24/7 operation. We never have a downtime really. And we focus on water, wastewater, waste services, stormwater, and recycled water. So we've got a lot going on in the utility. And this, we'd like to break it down into 4 focus areas. So the first focus area, next slide, please, is our fiscal performance, and we call this minding the money. Very, very important in my group. So this one, as we roll into our second year of our 2-year rate case, inflation is hitting us hard, just like we heard with electric. It's hitting us really hard, too, especially as it pertains to fuel costs. So we've seen rising costs in energy and chemicals, and we're doing all that we can to minimize the impacts in our rates. Like them, we also have rate stabilization funds that we purposely set aside to offset some of these costs so that it's not an immediate impact to our ratepayers. The last thing we want to do is go out for an emergency rate adjustment, so we plan for our rate stabilization funds to offset if we need to in the meantime. The second thing are rate adjustments that we've discussed. These will be effective on July 1st of 2022 for fiscal year 23. Water will go up by $1.56 a month, wastewater $2.70 a month, and waste services is $4.99 a month. Obviously, that's a large number, but as we discussed when we did our last rates case, we're being hit really hard by SB 1383. That's what, and that's partly what Devin would have reported on a little bit later, but you'll get that pretty soon. And then the last thing is, as I spoke in my update, in conjunction with the audit, we're looking to enhance some internal control structures. The next slide is our offense and defense. In this case, we spend a lot of time and effort helping others help us less. So mostly this is the state and federal government and their continuous regulations. So I call this the March of Mandates, not to be confused with March Madness, but March of Mandates, because it's constant, it doesn't stop. So this is the passing down of unfunded mandates, often with the best intentions, but clearly lacking some critical thinking and operational aspect of what are they really trying to accomplish and what is the best application of this for our ratepayers. So on an annual basis, there's roughly 2,500 to 3,000 bills that go through, with about 10% of those aimed at our utilities. So it's massive. The few that actually see the light of day, end up costing significant dollars and showing questionable value proposition to our ratepayers. So again, we ask the questions, what's the best benefit? And right now, we don't know the answers because they just keep coming and coming and coming. So our rate plans include some of these costs. We plan for these, but really it's tough to take. So we aren't really sure if it's the best use of public resources, but we're trying to combat these challenges. And as you can see, some of the mandates on our list right here, organics diversion, our ELAP accreditation, pushing paper around, we're not quite sure what that's all about yet. And the biggest one right there is our clean fleet standards. So by 2035, they're expecting that our fleets are electric. Is that reasonable? Right now, it's not. Can you imagine a garbage truck with, loaded down with waste that can only go so far? It's a problem that we're looking into. So by 2035, we'll see just what the fleet looks like. But if it actually comes to fruition, we'll probably need to double the size of our waste services fleet and reduce the loads by probably half. And trucks are not getting any cheaper. So we'll see. Our next slide. This is our resource portfolio and one of our largest operational focuses. So we're in the third consecutive drought year. We continue with efforts to combat the drought through behavior changes and by expanding our ASR program. So we are currently working on 2 wells and we have plans for 4 more. We're also providing a lot of resources to help the community use water much more wisely. We're updating agreements with PCWA and exploring new ideas and opportunities that may come along to help reduce our reliance on raw water deliveries from Folsom Dam. We also continue to explore our solid waste handling and disposal options. And again, Devin will give you a better update in the very near future. The expansion project at Pleasant Grove, have you seen some of the videos on that one? I think you can go online and watch it. It's really neat. So that project is kind of in the final lap, but it's going to take a while to get there. So we're finding that we have some issues, including COVID. COVID, does it ever go away? No. And supply chain. So we're seeing schedule changes that'll probably be expanded a little bit and more costs. And then finally, we have some ongoing rehabilitation of our assets. As I alluded to a moment ago, this is a constant process when you have such a large portfolio of assets. We plan for rehab in our rates, and many people who are new to Roseville are usually just amazed that we don't issue debt when we do our rehabilitation work. So it's on pay-go. And then our last one here is our workforce development. So we are kind of creating our future. And we heard from Electric all of the issues that they're having with staffing. We have those same issues, especially trying to retain garbage truck drivers, of all things. We get them. Sometimes they don't show up. Sometimes they show up for a day. Sometimes they get trained and then they go off and drive a truck for Walmart because they can make so much more money. It's just crazy what the market is right now. But people are our number one resource. Workloads grow based on city growth, and our mission expands due to regulations. So those are the 2 things that we're dealing with constantly. And then, as we talked about, we're engaging with younger people through job fairs. So we're trying to get to these kids early. And we're not really focused so much on the ones who are going to college, who know they're going to college. We're kind of trying to focus our efforts on the kids who aren't sure what they want to do, and maybe a 4-year college isn't in their future. Maybe that's just not what they want to do. But we're trying to get those kids and educate them and show them that there are opportunities in our utilities for welding, maybe electronic techs, a whole bunch of different things. A few weeks ago, we held an all-day activity at the Courtyard, and it was Roseville Electric and EU. And we brought kids out from the high school, and we showed them all kinds of different things. And I think they were mostly enchanted by our CCTV with our wastewater collections that go into the pipes, and then, the little robot thing scoots around and then it shows the video of what it looks like inside those, they loved it. But those are the kids that we need to get our heads around and get them excited about a potential future career with the utilities. So we're also devoting substantial time to our succession planning and knowledge transfer. As long-term employees, kind of like me, are starting to look towards retirement, it's important to prepare others to carry on. So I spend a lot of time with my group doing just training sessions. And there's a lot of things I give them to do, knowing that they're going to not necessarily struggle, but ask a lot of questions because that's how they learn. But, it's something that I can probably get my hands on and finish very quickly, but I really need to take a step back and let them learn while I'm here to teach them. And I never thought I'd be a teacher, but here I am, being a teacher. But it's great, and EU has very strong values and a culture, and we go a long way in driving positive change. So, I've worked for 3 EU directors in my 26 years in this department. We had Derek Whitehead, who was here for a very long time. Then we had Ed Kriz, who was here for a shorter period of time, and then Rich. And, I love the fact that the values and the culture have just gotten better and better over the years, and it's a great place to be. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions over here? Over here?
I just have I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you
I
very
like
much.
plain speaking, and I thank you. That
Thank
was
you.
very informative.
So I've just got a few comments. I was at the farmer's market this morning, and environmental utility water use folks were out, had a booth talking about how to be water wise.
That's right.
I did cardboard recycling today, and I did get a question. There was some debris that wasn't in the boxes, and the question was, what could we do? And I'm like, I don't know, but I will ask.
Is this debris that's on the ground because
The
people have
ground.
been a little bit messy?
Bit messy, yeah.
Yeah. When our guys go out to pick up those, they will clean those up.
Yeah.
But, as good citizens, if you see it, you can always pick it up and throw it in the right place.
Yeah, yeah. So my question for the gentleman who asked me the question, I'm like, so what do you think we can do about it? Because he's like, grumble. I'm like, wait a minute, let's look for a solution, not just a grumble.
Right, don't complain just because there's a mess there. Do something about it.
One of the questions that I have is the rollout of the third bin, the organic diversion. Where are we on that? Or is that something you're prepared to
We're
chat
still
about?
kind of in wait mode, and we're evaluating all of that, especially in light of what we might be doing with the potential facility that we're evaluating too. So it was a good rollout for the experimental phase, but now we're just kind of stepping back and evaluating what that looks like going forward.
And timeframe, is there a point where you have to decide and we have to implement something?
That's probably a good question. I wish Devin were here. He would know that,
Okay.
just like that. But
All right.
I know that because we did our test phase, that we're still in compliance.
Okay. And then my last question was about the drought. We're in year 3. How is that expected to impact us, or is that something we should bring back for another time?
Definitely ask it next time. But from what I know, there seems to be some water out there, but we are still encouraging significant water savings as much as we can. And I believe that we have days that we can water and days that we can't. So we're trying to do as much education as we can out there with our public, just to keep them somewhat in compliance so that we as a city stay in compliance as a whole. But Sean will be a much better voice on that soon.
It is a bit of a surprise that we went back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. A lot of people have commented that they look at other communities that are doing the opposite.
Right.
And they'd say, what's happening with Roseville?
I think this is just the plan that was laid out, and we're just carrying that out.
So what are the other plans?
Well, the fact that we went from Monday and Friday to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's just
Yeah, when it gets
raised a few
hotter,
eyebrows.
oh, I apologize.
No, just raised eyebrows. when
Okay,
we did
yeah,
that.
when it gets warmer, we add a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any other questions from the commissioners? Is there any public comment? Not seeing any public comment. I want to thank you, Janet, for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience with me.
And the last item on our original agenda is going to be postponed. Next on our agenda is board member and commissioner reports, questions. Any other reports from staff? Oh, I'm sorry.
So, on the board member, I had sent an email and asked about a tour, and I was hoping that we'd resolve when that was going to be tonight. I thought perhaps, since we had everybody here.
Okay.
What kind of tour?
Water treatment plant.
Because if all of the commissioners go, we just have to notice it as a public meeting. And so that would be the coordination of all of that. Not a problem, but just there's that Brown Act thing to deal with.
Okay.
But I'll
Yeah.
have to ask him to get back
Very
with
good,
all of you.
very good.
Does anyone have any items they'd like to suggest as for a future meeting? Well, may I have a motion to adjourn? And a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, we are adjourned.
So, Janet,
Yes.
That was good.